was a Victorian fireplace which we took out, which revealed a Tudor fireplace, and above that was layers and layers of wallpaper. So we decided to start scraping it off, and...
So this was, the wallpaper was stuck to this?
Yes.
It's obviously a smart 17th century house, and it's wonderful. I mean, the red brick glows. These houses did glow then. It's a fair bet to assume that this is a real house, it's not a fantasy house. And this, I'm sure, is by an English painter, not a Dutch painter. Say about 1700, 1710, 1720. The panelling tells us that, the whole way it's put together. We can trace the history of this sort of painting very easily. And the reason, as you can see, the reason I wanted to show the back of the panelling is there's not a split, barely a split on this panel. And the reason is this is seasoned wood, 20-year-old wood, so it doesn't move. Good lesson for builders today. Wonderful.
Well, it's just one that, to me and my mother, we think that this is out of position compared with the landscape, which looks quite normal. And it seems to me as though that they've put the landscape in, and then as an afterthought, they've put the building.
Well, had you thought that really the landscape that we know today in England is basically an invention of the 18th century? This artist is very happy putting in these abstract shapes. I mean, this is a wonderful abstract painting as well. And this formality of gardens is something that comes from Europe, imposing an architectural statement on the landscape. In fact, in Britain now, because of Capability Brown and Humphrey Repton, we do exactly the opposite. We garden to the landscape. We like to garden as though it's natural. But there's another thing, which is very interesting. You said this picture was over the mantelpiece.
That's right, yes.
One of the interesting things about the fashion of having your house painted was that they replaced portraits. So it was actually exactly where it should have been for the fashion of the day. I think it's wonderful.
Yes.
And I think it's very interesting. I mean, I've never seen such a complete British painting of this period in a way. It's very difficult to price something like this, but I think at least 10 to 15,000. It's a wonderful object.
Oh, thanks very much.
Oh dear, speechless. I'm speechless.
Well, this little painting is by an artist called Émile Auguste Pinchard. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Well, he's one of those artists who's very little known. I mean, he is known, he is recorded, but not a lot about him. I notice it's inscribed. Can you tell us something of the history?
Well, that is a picture of my wife's great aunt, done on the banks of Lake Como.
Yeah, so this is your wife's great aunt?
Yes.
Who is named Miss Allen?
Yes. Now, she is from the family of the publishers, Allen and Unwin.
Oh, right.
Her great-great-grandfather started Allen and Unwin.
One hopes that, in a way, or one would like to think that it may be a charming little love note, although
yes.
She was probably quite young and he was about 50. He was born in 1842. He's French, in fact, and a pupil of a very classical artist called Jerome. But here, he's not being Jerome-like at all. He's moved to Switzerland.
Yes.
He's being much more avant-garde for the time. He's,
yes.
Or anyway, part of the modern movement, very much like Alfred Stevens, the Belgian,
yes.
what we call today post-impressionists, what all the Scandinavians were doing and everything else. But I think this picture has that extra touch of beauty and charm, romance.
Yes.
We'd all like to be standing on that pier.
Tell me, I've wondered for a long time, is it an oil or...
The reason it's confusing is there's oil, but it's on card or paper. Oil takes on a certain quality when it's painted on paper, different quality. But I think it's absolutely beautiful, and it seems extraordinary, but I think one could buy a picture like this for, say, £3,000 or £4,000. Now, if Mr. Pinchard had a slightly different name, which was better known, we might be talking about £15,000. So it's not a very expensive picture.
No.
Ralph Headley is a local artist of quite some repute, and I'm not surprised to see it here, but I am delighted to see such a magnificent work. Tell me about your connection with this picture.
Well, I'm Ralph Headley's great-grandson. I didn't inherit it, I bought it for about £50 in 1971.
Of course, he is well known for his working class
Yes.
subjects, as it were.
Yes,
And here is a scene that you would have seen all over Britain,
yes.
because they made bricks on the spot in all sorts of places. But I can't think of many paintings of brickmaking.
Yes.
Do you know about brickmaking?
Well, I do because I have because I have this painting.
Because you have the painting.
It tells me about brickmaking.
Well, it does really, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And I'll tell you why I like this picture immensely. Because the composition tells the story.
Yes.
It's all about composition. Where do you start? In a way, well, of course, you start in most pictures in the foreground. And where does it lead your eye? It leads your eye down here to this anonymous heap. What is that heap? Of course, that is the clay. And that clay has actually been sitting there probably for a year. And then it leads you back down the wheelbarrow track. And where does the clay go? It goes into this machine. So as you say, I haven't done a quick course in brickmaking as well with this picture. And then they fill up the bricks, and it seems to me that they squeeze out the water and it comes down this channel. And then she's placing the bricks here. That's what good composition is about. It leads your eye around the picture. And there is no question that this composition is a very dynamic composition. Not just because your eye is led around the picture, but when you come to this figure, in the foreground, the main figure of the girl placing the bricks from the molds just to dry out on the earth, she is echoed by the man with the wheelbarrow. So then you see the dynamics of the two working people, each with a different task. Now, the interesting thing is, was that in the family? This is the sketch for the painting?
No, a London gallery inquired about this picture of the Laying Art Gallery in Newcastle.
Right.
And they
Led directly to the family?
directly to me,
Yeah.
and I couldn't refuse to buy it.
No. Well, I think it's very interesting because here is the artist working out his thoughts in a sketch.
Yes.
And it doesn't really work. And we can see here that instead of having a dynamic here, it's rather flat and one-planed. And the wall doesn't lead to the clay, and he hasn't got it right. He's working out his thoughts. It's very interesting. You should bring the two, because this is what art is all about. Value. What did you say it cost you? I can't remember.
£50.
£50, 1971.
1971, yeah.
Not bad. I think a fair value is £35,000, £40,000.
That would.
Curator of the local museum.
Yes, that's right.
And has this picture been on display?
No, it hasn't. It's been lying in the art store at the museum, unseen and indeed pushed very much towards the back of the store for as many years as anyone can remember, really.
I'm going to take it out, if I may.
Yes, indeed.
Because it's behind glass, which has its advantages, but also its disadvantages for television. And I assume you brought it in because you like the artist.
That's right. I know the name Jack Yates, and I realise that he is an artist of some interest, but I know no further than that.
Really? Well, I think that Jack Yates is one of the great 20th century artists. And I see Jack as being a visionary poet in paint. His father was an artist, and the two brothers, Jack Butler Yates and his brother William Butler Yates, and William, of course, being the visionary poet. And what I like especially about this is that it's been behind glass, and the glazes are untouched. We're not looking at something where the varnish is dull, we're looking at them as fresh as the day they were painted. And of course, the Irish now have really begun to appreciate their own art. So in Irish terms, in the Irish market terms, Yates is highly appreciated. It's not enough for me.
No.
I think he should be appreciated throughout the world as a major 20th century artist.
Yeah.
But it's so exciting to see what I call a real painting here on the show, rather than a beautifully academic painting. So I'm really pleased. So you've really got to take some steps to get this on the museum wall.
Yes, indeed. Well, as you said, it's a terribly important painting then, which has been stuffed in the back of a cupboard for far too long, really. Well, one of the first things I will do, obviously, is make sure we get it mounted in a better frame, really, and we'll get it on display as soon as possible.
I'm not too sure of the date myself, but I would say it's 1930s or 40s.
Right.
It's not as late as 50s, and I don't think it's as early as 20s, so I think it's somewhere
Yes.
in there, probably in the 1940s, I think.
Yes.
I mean, this is quite an expensive picture.
Right.
A Yates has been sold at auction for over £250,000, and a little larger than this, maybe 20 by 30 inches or 30 by 40 inches, but and have been sold privately for more than that. I don't think it's a lot of money. I don't think when you've got a major international artist, it's a lot of money.
No.
It's only a lot of money if you consider Yates to be a minor provincial Irish artist, which I don't.
No, indeed.
And this, I think, today is worth £60,000 to £80,000.
Good Lord.
It has tremendous charisma. It is the most compulsive object in my house.
Yes.
And it's in my living room and people comment on it. It has a lot of humour, a lot of compassion. It is very much of its period, when women became came out into the world and had occupations. It was the beginning, wasn't it?
Yes.
Nursing and teaching. And she was obviously a lady of some quality, and I think had quite a comfortable life.
Did you, I mean, have you ever done any research on this with the family or anything like that?
Yes, in 1980 there was an exhibition of Clauson work at the Royal Academy.
Yes.
And I did write to the organisers, and they very kindly passed on a photograph to the Clauson family.
Yes.
But the Clauson family weren't able to find any records in his logbooks or with his family.
And they didn't, did they make any comment on whether they didn't recognise the girl or anything?
No, there was no recognition of the girl.
Okay, because I mean, I know the reason for asking this, I mean, first of all, I suppose I ought to talk a little about George Clauson, who was one of the most beautiful artists in Britain, in the post-impressionist plein air style, the style that came out of France.
Yes.
But also he was a very good portrait painter.
Right.
But I mean, his portraits were more private than public, I think. And and then we come to the First World War.
Right.
This is 1917. He's 66 years old.
Yes.
No chicken.
Yes.
But like everybody else, he was deeply touched by the war. And he was touched by the war most personally because his daughter's fiancé was killed, I'm not sure, 1915-16.
Right.
And he painted that very moving picture in the War Museum, which I think is called, do you remember what it's called? Youth Sorrows?
Yes.
Of the nude girl crouched
In front of
the cross.
Yes.
And I think just like Youth Sorrows is an allegory of the hell of war, I think perhaps this is also another allegory, but approached from a different direction. For me, the most compelling thing about this picture that takes us into those hellish years is her eyes. These eyes have had the cream of youth dying in her arms. And these eyes reflect something within her which she will live with for the rest of her life, as most people who survived the First World War did.
Yes.
And I think that it's a very, very beautiful, poignant picture from that point of view.
Yes.
It's not going to be, I mean, a George Clauson could make £500,000. A wonderful, bright, popular
The large
picture.
agricultural paintings,
Yeah,
yes.
something,
Yes.
you know, or something like that. It could make a lot of money. We're not talking about this. We're talking about our history.
Yes.
I would value this at £20,000 to £30,000, that sort of level.
Yes.
And I think it's a wonderful treasure.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Which is very special.
The rip has always been there.
Is it? Where's it been then, this much-loved picture?
I think it was in an old barn or a farm building for about 30 years. And then my father, he bought it about 20 years ago. I think it was a house sale for a few pounds. It wasn't expensive.
What did he think about it?
He liked it, but we didn't know how to get it restored.
Right.
So it just got left. I've always assumed it was Waterhouse.
Do you know about Waterhouse?
I've seen an Antiques Roadshow before, and there was a painting on there by the same artist, and that's why I bought this today.
Right. But this is so untypical, this picture, that first of all we say, well, it's not really a Waterhouse. But It is signed JWW down here. And if I think about Waterhouse when he started painting, he was sort of experimenting. He wasn't really very well trained when he started painting. He painted little interiors and this sort of thing. And I personally think this is by Waterhouse, John William Waterhouse, because I think it's the young man coming into being a better painter, and before he's really decided the subjects he really wants to do, which is his affinity to the pure aphrodite and pretty girls. So, on balance, I'm going to say this is a genuine Waterhouse. And then we have to say, well, since you've looked after it so beautifully...
I'm not to blame for it.
Since you looked after it so beautifully, what's it worth? It's in rotten condition, but this can be put right, although I think that that will be difficult to clean. This area I'm not worried about, but the dirt is quite ingrained into that impasto there. I think between £5,000 and £10,000. £5,000 or £6,000.
Shock. I am shocked. I am. I thought about £500. I was so worried about the rip.
Well, it's pretty nasty. That is horrid, you know, and that's needs a lot of work doing, and so does this. But I didn't see why, you know, finished and all done up, somebody might ask £20,000 for it or something.
So it's worth for me to take it and have it restored.
I think so, yes. Born in Kettering, studies in Glasgow, goes to France, studies the Barbican artists, Corot and all those sort of people, travels everywhere, Morocco, Japan, becomes very famous, highly sought after. And, I mean, and tell me what you think about this painting.
Without seeming sophisticated myself, I like the freehand style, and I like the way that you can look at the picture in a general way, as opposed to in a relaxed way, as opposed to having to study the picture. I like the picture to speak to me,
right,
and absorb the colours and the sort of free flow of the painting.
Because, you know, this sort of painting is really out of fashion today, because it speaks to you, but it sort of doesn't say a lot, does it?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's hard to think why East, East can paint beautiful things. I mean, these little views of Japan are absolutely exquisite, and some of his things. But generally, when he's painting this size, I find them, and I don't think I'm very different from the general public today, a bit boring.
Yeah, a bit too big.
Well, it's just there's not much going on, and I don't think this is his best work either. This period, I mean, the way he melts all this in is fine, but he hasn't done terribly well here.
No.
It's not signed, but I mean, you are quite sure it's an East.
I'm confident it's an East.
I'm confident it's an East too, so we'll agree on that.
But not one of his better ones.
No. Now, tell me about this. Tell me what you think about this.
I think this is far more vibrant and more interesting. It's small enough to hang in the living room, and it may have been a little bit nicer if the lady was facing us as opposed to away. But generally, I find
that's a lady?
it's... isn't it? I don't know.
I think it's a good old gardener.
Is it?
Of the younger male variety myself, but...
Well, if these are nettles, he's got his work cut out.
I think it's a much better picture than that. It's got a better composition, it's more vibrant, and actually it's a different mentality. This is based on sort of Barbizon principles, which are going to the landscape in a certain way and going to the woods and painting quite dense subjects. This is based on Impressionist principles. Sisley and Pissarro going to common a garden, domestic subjects and landscapes, and making them live in a way. And here is a garden, and it's the garden of a reasonable house. Here is the garden boy. It's just a bit overgrown here, but Marguerite's and very French. So maybe it's not any feeling in France. Maybe this is in France.
Oh, really?
But on the other hand, that's rather an English roof, I think.
Yeah.
I think we're back to Kettering.
All right, good. Good.
Right. A painting like this, which would have probably fetched a relatively large amount during his lifetime, is relatively small on today's market. So I would say £1,500, £2,000, something like that.
That's not too bad then.
This one, I think, really is a picture that would be desired. It's got a focal point. I can see sort of £6,000 to £8,000.
You're kidding me.
Well, why not?
That is fantastic. That is really good.
Well, this is a real artist group of pictures, and there's obviously a good reason for that.
Yes, well, I'm a painter myself, and some people might look at something like that and think it's just a scrappy drawing. But
No,
I
but
think
I
it's
mean, as
lovely.
an artist, presumably, you're more interested in personal things.
Yes, I am. You know, I mean, I like the Sicket, you know, because it's, you know, a very personal thing. It's almost as he's been sat at his chair and just drawn that.
Well, absolutely.
And also, it's not about technical brilliance. It's about character, and I think that, you know, that drawing has great character.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's why. And I think actually everything you have here has character. And then the Augustus John.
Yeah, I mean, Augustus John's not one of my favourite artists, but I like that drawing because it's so loose and airy. It's almost like a Matisse drawing. You know,
Well, I think he was just indisciplined. You know, at his best, he's wonderful. But he produced all this indisciplined stuff because he didn't know when to stop, really.
Yeah.
In anything.
Well, that's a good thing, I think, for an artist.
What about Patrick Heyman?
Well, I bought that while I was at art college, and I didn't know anything about him. I bought it from a gallery for next to nothing,
But why did you buy it? That's what I want.
because I liked the looseness of it. I love the blue.
Yeah.
The skin tones with the blue, I think, are really nice. It really warmed it up for something that's quite cold.
And Patrick Heyman was a very private artist. He was he was a visionary, and he dug deep into himself, got rid of all the sophistication, became a deliberate, naive painter, but in a very genuine way. Very interesting. And finally, I don't know this artist at all.
Alan Walton.
Yes.
Well, I didn't buy that. I inherited that piece. I don't know that much about him either, to be honest, but I just like the painting.
It's a stunning painting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think we can begin to put it together. In other words, it's just before the First World War. It's on leave, tired and emotional. But it's immensely powerful.
I mean,
Wonderful.
even though the legs here are very awkward, the hands just, you know, kind of scrapped in.
Yeah,
It
excellent.
works beautifully. You don't question the fact that, you know, the leg would have to be broken to be in that shape. You just don't question it because the thing as a whole works.
Absolutely. Terrific impact. Right, we're going to do prices now.
Right.
Thing that interests me least, but we'll do the prices.
Right.
Sicket drawing. Very beautiful. I think £5,000 to £8,000, maybe a bit more.
Good gosh.
Good drawing. Augustus John suffers from his overproduction, as it were.
Yeah.
I think 1,000, 1,500 for that.
Yeah.
Patrick Heyman, being such a private artist, not discovered by the general public. You could buy a great painting by him like this for around £1,000, 1,500, something like that. And finally, Alan Walton, the Alan Walton. Well, I don't know whether he has any value on the market as such. In other words, there's any record of value. I simply don't know. But that's a hell of a picture. I must say at least £10,000 to £15,000. You know.
I'm very surprised.
Well, it's a cracking picture.
Yes, I know a little bit because I managed to find a book about him. I know he was in Leeds.
John Atkinson Grimshaw.
That's right.
Yes.
And that he became famous for the moonlit scenes that he painted.
Yes.
Which this is a fairly minor one, I think. But it's always intrigued me. It's been in our family for almost exactly 100 years.
Well, I mean, Grimshaw is a very interesting artist. When he started painting in the 1860s, he painted very, very precisely. And in fact, he was also a photographer. So there is a photographic base to a great number of Grimshaw's paintings. Grimshaw is a northern artist, and therefore, because he never moves to London, he has to make success in the north, which is a rare thing in a way. Most people move to London to make that success or move to a bigger town. But when he became successful, like a lot of artists, he became popular, he had to produce more paintings. And painstaking techniques do not allow you to mass produce. So he started using more photographic bases and started using more workers. Here you see the typical Grimshaw trees. And you see quite hard work in here. the way these branches are done. You can see how cleverly this is stippled in. It's actually painted rather fast. Basically, Grimshaw and his team have learnt the tricks. That they've learnt the tricks how to paint the foreground and the background, how to paint the muddy road with the minimum of effort. I mean, the maximum technique, but the minimum of effort. And I think this is very apparent in this picture because it seems to me that this is one of those Grimshaws which has at least two different hands in. And shows its strengths and its weaknesses for that. That its strengths are here, very beautiful. The foreground is a bit automatic. If this was an 1870s picture, you would really feel this foreground. You'd really feel those ruts in the mud. And then it seems to me that this is a bit weak. I don't know how you feel about it.
I have often felt the horses were weak.
Yes, it just doesn't quite hold together. This heavy cart laden with trees is not sinking into the mud. You know, and the horses, instead of straining to get round the corner and slightly go down, are sort of as though they're on a Sunday stroll. And so, was there a problem up here with the moon?
Well, that's part of the family story. Apparently during the war years, there was a cleaning lady helping in the house, and she assumed that the moon was a spot of something that had fallen on the picture, and she tried to clean the moon off.
Do you have a lot of pigeons in your house?
Not as far as I know.
As soon as you explain it, then we can see why the moon doesn't balance with the rest of the picture, which it would have done. And she's not only had a good scrub here, she's actually removed, I would suggest, a slight tone from over the whole thing, so that this circle, or the aura of the moon in the mist, has actually come to prominence. Because when an artist finishes a painting, what he does, he balances with usually pure glazes over the surface. And in this case, this stands out like a sort of archery target. It's a Grimshaw showing his feeding the mass market rather than painstakingly painting the best pictures. Price, I would have thought more like £15,000. 15. I mean, if it was a great Grimshaw, we'd be talking 30, so I'm going to say 15.
It's obviously a small, relatively minor work. But, that's very interesting. Thank you very much.